right? Evander Kane's career high, Frank, in points is 57. That's his career high. Now, this season, obviously in Edmonton, he had 22 goals and 39 points in 43 games, right? And there's some, you can say, the shortened season, he would have projected for more. Sure, that's fine. But at the end of the day, okay, so fine, projected to 65, right? Kane went off in the postseason at 13 and 15, but he's playing with the two best offensive players in the National Hockey League. I wonder how, now he was making $7 million before, and he was a good player, but I saw Kevin Weeks at it that, he'd be looking for $8 million, and, maybe someone brings it. But it is interesting when guys have career years leading up to free agency. How do you balance that, right? Because I think there's always the side of GMs that are like, well, he did it once, he can do it again, right? And sometimes they pay him for that rather than say, well, what did he do the other 6 years?
Yeah, it's tough to balance. I mean, I don't know what I would do with Kane. Like I if I were the Oilers, I'd probably just say, you know what, this was a great opportunity, one moment in time where we had a tiny bit of cap space. You were in trouble. This was mutually beneficial. We helped throw you a lifeline. We put a little jangle in your pocket, and we gave you an opportunity to show what you could. You scored 35 goals in 58 games. It was impressive, but to get locked up with Evander Kane long-term, I think is a mistake.
No, I said it the day he was signed that realistically, I thought a 2-year deal would make the most sense. You might be able to convince me for 3 if the cap hit was lower, but I wouldn't go longer than that. Like I'm sorry, Frank. Some of the things I've heard off the ice, and selfish guy will kind of beat to his own drum all the time. That's hard to change, right? Maya Angelou always said it once, Frank, when someone shows you who they are the first time, believe it. And you know what? You can change, and there's certain things, hopefully improves on, but because it's funny, like the best description I heard from, he's not a bad guy. He's just ultra selfish. That was what I heard from numerous players. So if you're ultra selfish, that means you'll decide, hey, you know what? Curfew doesn't matter to me. Hey, this doesn't matter to me because I'm more important. And so that to me is going to be the risk. And any team, if some team offers him a long-term deal, I think they'll end up regretting it. Short term, I think you keep him. You kind of have the carrot dangling in front of him, right? It keeps him motivated to stay on track. And because if you go off track on a short-term deal, then guess what? You're costing yourself big time on the next deal.
I'm not here to say whether he is a good guy or a bad guy or selfish or he isn't. I don't really care. He's unquestionably a good hockey player. He can unquestionably score goals, and he's a really smart guy. I think that's what's the most annoying part about all of this is like Evander Kane's no dummy.
No, not at all.
And I just think teams have been snookered already, multiple teams. Hey, this guy's, he's going to change. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. Remember how we had all these stories in San Jose to start? Oh, different guy, amazing, comes in 1 year, has a great year. They signed him to that 7-year extension. And all we heard, like, oh, Jumbo set him straight, picked him up at the airport. And like this, it's all great. It took 3 years for that to rear its head and for them to run him out of town to the point where they literally were like, we don't care what needs to happen. We are terminating this contract because they just couldn't deal with him anymore. He shows up in Edmonton. He's a smart guy. He's able to be a chameleon and fit in and blend in. And now what? It's easy to do that for, I don't know, when did you get there? February? Like,
yeah, basically end of January. Yeah, 4 months.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it'd be a mistake to do anything more than, honestly, I'd give him 1-year deal. I'd give him a series of 1-year deals, and I'd be willing to pay more just to have the flexibility. You want 1 year, $8 million? I'll do that.
Yeah, I would agree.
But my guess is to get him, someone's going to have to do 3 times 7 or something like that in order to make it happen. And I don't blame him at all. He's in a spot where he needs to maximize his earnings and get as much as he can.
The one thing that Evander Kane showed that I've always believed, Frank, you put an actual finisher with McDavid or Draisaitl, that's what's going to happen. And I think for the Edmonton Oilers, like no offense to Kailer Yamamoto or Jesse Puljujarvi or even Zach Hyman, you need a legit finisher. And that's
how good would DeBrincat look there?
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Wouldn't he be like, if you were to find a prototype player to plug in there, is that the guy?
Well, see, the one other element that Kane brought that the Oilers organization needed, he was tough.
Yeah,
right?
He's
like,
got that edge to him.
Yeah, he's got an edge. He's physically can really skate. So
I didn't realize he led the league for 2 seasons in penalty minutes.
Oh yeah. No, he's always engaged, right? Like he'll rough guys up. He's not intimidated by anybody. I give him credit for that. Like he does not get intimidated. We saw him, he chirp Reeves. He'll fight Reeves for goodness sake. So he's not scared. And I think that does. I'm still a believer that when you have a guy like that on your team, it elevates other guys and physically. So I'm not sure DeBrincat necessarily. Like if you have Yamamoto still in your top 6, then you throw in DeBrincat. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily the one. And that's the challenge for the Oilers. Like, it's hard to find legit goal scorers, right? So maybe you can, maybe you look at it, but I
think that's why the Oilers are so desperate to consider the option or conversation is like, he does score, he's a finisher, and he's got the edge that he is a really good fit stylistically. And that's why I think they have to go through the exercise. I would just say enough is enough at some point. The
guy on your trade board that would be kind of like a poor man's version of Kane is Josh Anderson, right? Big body. He doesn't, he did score 27 goals once, right? Basically the other times he's like an 18 to 19 goal scorer. If he stays healthy the way he plays, but I don't think he's still as good of a pure finisher as much as Kane, but you know what? He's a fairly smart player. He would be the one guy, right? And he's 5.5 cap hit. He's locked up for a long time. Maybe Montreal's looking to completely change things for them, but he's the one guy on your trade board, Frank, that kind of fits the bill of the style of play of Kane. He's not as good of a producer yet, at least historically he hasn't been, but he would be the closest one that I see on the board.
Yeah, I think he's a real long shot to move.
Yeah, I would agree too. Why would
I think they've gotten some really interesting offers though. Like I think teams have been very aggressive in trying to get him. And I think to this point they've resisted every urge, but I kept him on there because I think you have to at least allow for the possibility that someone just comes in and says, you know what, whatever you want, you can have. We want this guy.